Hello everyone, this is Nifty255, and welcome to my KSP modding tutorial series, Volume 1, Custom Parts, Episode 2, Game Models and Textures. In today's episode, we will discuss how to export textured 3D models into the correct formats, and how to import them into the game itself. But first, let's go over what you will need to create your own parts. Keep in mind that this tutorial will assume you know how to operate the programs shown, or their equivalents, or at least can look up tutorials for them. The first thing you will need is a 3D modeling program. You can use either Blender, which is free, or 3ds Max, which you must purchase. I will be using Blender version 2.63 for this tutorial. In order to download Blender, you must go to www.blender.org. You will find the download button for version 2.7 in the right area of the banner. If you want to download an older version, such as the one I am using, you will find an older versions link to the immediate right of the download button. Next, you will need an image editing program. You can use either Adobe Photoshop, which must be purchased, or GIMP, which is free. I will be using Adobe Photoshop CC, which is subscription-based rather than requiring a large one-time purchase. However, since most will not have access to Photoshop, I will show you where to get GIMP. In order to download GIMP, you will need to go to www.gimp.org. You will find the download button at the bottom right part of the banner. Next, you will need the Unity game engine, version 4.3 or higher. We must use this because Kerbal Space Program is built from this engine, and thus all the game models are also built from it. Also, note there is both a free and a paid version of Unity, known as Indie and Pro. You do not need the Pro version to create your custom parts. In order to download Unity, you must go to www.unity3d.com. You will find a link to the download page at the right of the navigation bar. Click the download button to begin your download. The last thing you will need is a package of code files for Unity called Part Tools. We will go into details on the download and setup of this tool later. All of the links to these programs and tools can be found in the description of this video. Now that we have our programs, let's get started. The first step in creating a model is determining the size of your desired part. 1 unit in Blender is equal to 1.25 meters in Kerbal Space Program. Using that conversion rate, it's easy to get any other size in the game. For example, you can see here that my part is 2 units wide in Blender. Thus, in Kerbal Space Program, my part will be 2.5 meters wide, which is the same size as the Jumbo 64 fuel tank. Because of this, my part is considered a size 2 part. If you are creating a part that can be attached radially, then it is easiest if you first make cylinders of various sizes to see how your part looks attached to each one. Also, you will have to consider vertical sizes. As you can see in this image, my 1.5 unit tall part is exactly as tall as the X216 fuel tank, which is considered a half-size part. For comparison, here are the X200-8 and the X200-32, which are considered quarter and full size respectively. In case this is all a bit too much, here is a handy spreadsheet to show various sizes that parts can be in. Now that you have created your model, it is time to create a collision mesh. This will be a second model in the same file with a lower polygon count than your actual model. This will tell Kerbal Space Program how your part interacts physically with other parts in the ground. In order to show you my part model, I have moved my collision mesh a few units down. Here is where my collision mesh should be. Now that your collision mesh is made, you may add animations to your model if you wish. In order to show you how to handle animations in the export process, I have included one, which is little more than an opening and closing door. If you are finished with your model, its animations, and its collision mesh, we can move on to the next step, texture making. Textures are an image that are applied to models through a technique called UV unwrapping, in which a model is taken apart using certain marked edges called seams and laid flat as if it were an image. Here is a simple example of UV unwrapping. And this is how my model, which has 2 meshes, looks unwrapped. Note that your collision mesh does not need to be unwrapped. A cool feature of Blender that I recently found myself is the ability to export outlines of your UV maps to images for use as guides when you create your texture. To do this, first ensure that you have created an image data block by clicking the New button. Select your image size, but be aware that all textures must be sized by a power of 2 and square, such as 512 by 512 or 1024 by 1024. Next, make sure everything in your map is selected. Click the UVs menu and select the Export UV Layout. The next screen will allow you to save the image any place you choose. You may now open this image in your image editing software. If you have multiple meshes and UVs, you may find it difficult to line them up properly in your program. If this happens, it may be best to add a few small marks in each corner to trick the program into thinking that you need the entire selection, even if most of it is empty space. Using these guidelines, you can now easily create your texture. Here is mine. After you've saved your texture, you need to apply it to your model. Select your model in Blender and add a material. Next, add a texture. Change the texture type to Image or Movie. After you've done so, click the Open button. Navigate to and select your texture image. Now open the Mapping section and change coordinates to UV. Next, click the Map drop-down and select UV Map. Leave Projection as flat. At this point, your texture should now be applied. You can preview your model now by pressing F12 or by opening the Render menu in the top left and clicking Render Image. Be sure that if you decide to preview, that you move your collision mesh out of the way and that you move it back when you're done. Now that your model is made and textured, we can begin the export and import process. After saving your work, be sure that all meshes that you want to export, including the collision mesh, are selected. Open the File menu in the top left and hover over Export. You can either export as Collada or as Autodesk FBX, but for consistency, we will export as FBX, since I'm not too sure how well Collada supports animation. Click the FBX option. In the next screen, you will notice some settings on the left. Leave all of these as they are except the Selected Objects checkbox. Enable this so that the extra objects in the scene, like lamps and such, are not also exported. After you've saved your model, we can import it into Unity. When you first open Unity, you will likely be greeted with a dialog similar to this. Unity, being a game engine, divides everything up by projects. Because of this, you must create a new project in order to convert your models into the format Kerbal Space Program accepts. Browse to the location you want your project to reside, create a new empty folder titled Part Exporter, select it, and then click Select Folder. Next, you will notice that the dialog shows a list of packages to import. We will be using a package, but not any of these. Leave all of them unchecked and click Create. Now, we must get that Part Tools package I mentioned earlier. In order to download the Part Tools package, you will need to go to the Kerbal Space Program forums, a link to which will be provided both as an annotation to this video and in the description. Once you have downloaded the package, open up Unity, and then open up your Part Tools zip folder. Extract this as zip folder, double-click Part Tools, and drag these three folders into this block here in Unity. Wait for it to load. After Unity has finished importing the assets, you will notice that underneath the Assets folder, which is automatically created with your project, now has three folders: Editor, Lib, and Shaders. These are the KSP part tools. Next, we will begin importing our part. A quick thing worth noting is that your layout may not look like mine. It may look like it, or it may look similar to this. The key in importing the Part Tools package is to ensure that you are dropping them into the project window under the Assets folder. I'm going back to my favorite layout. Now that the Part Tools package has been imported, you need to add two folders to the Assets folder. Right-click, Create Folder. This one will be named Models. The second folder will be named Textures. Now, select the Models folder, navigate to the game model that you exported, and drag it into Unity. Notice that it has also created a Materials folder. This is absolutely fine. Next, we will import our texture. Now, we need to properly configure our model. First, go to the model itself. You will notice there are three tabs. If you are not animating your model, you will not need to worry about the Rig or Animations tabs. However, you still need to change your scale factor to 1 to ensure that your part does not come out tiny. Also, if your part is cylindrical or spherical, you may need to change the normals to calculate in order to smooth out your part properly. Click Apply. Since my part has animations, I will need to configure my Rig and Animations tabs. Go to Rig if you have animations and change animation type from generic to legacy. Click Apply and go to Animations. Now, since the FBX format only accepts one animation clip and you may need multiple animations, the normal practice is to place all animations in a single clip. Unity provides the ability to separate those animation clips once the model has been imported. I have two animations, so I need to add two more clips. The first one I will call Open and set the proper keyframes. And I can preview down here by pressing play to ensure that I have the right keyframes. Looks good. Now I need to add my second animation, named Close. Set the keyframes, and preview. This looks fine to me. Click Apply. Next, we need to configure our materials. Go to the Materials folder. If your collider has a material, you do not need to worry about it. It will be removed later, but not from the project. Go to the material that will be used for rendering and change the shader from Diffuse to the KSP Diffuse shader. If you have bump maps, you may also add bump maps or specular, and even emissive particles and alpha shaders. But since my part only has a diffuse texture, I will use KSP Diffuse. Next, we need to assign the texture to this material. Click on the Shaders folder and drag your texture into the material. Now that our part has been properly configured, it is time to begin the export process. In order to do so, we need to create an empty game object. Go to the Game Object menu, Create Empty, and then we will add a component. Go to the KSP and select Part Tools. This game object will act as the exporter for our part. Go ahead and click the Set Game Data directory, and this window will pop up. Click the Set Data Directory button, and I will export my part here in a new empty folder, labeled Processed Models. Now that that has been set, go ahead and close that window, and drag your model into the empty game object. You will now see it in the scene, but you will also see the collider. We need to fix that. Open your part and go to the collider and remove the mesh renderer by right-clicking and selecting Remove Component. But now, the collider doesn't collide anything. We need to also add a component. Go to Physics and select Mesh Collider. In case this does not select the mesh automatically, you may need to click this circle and select the proper mesh. The last thing you need to do is select the convex checkbox. Since mine has animations, I also need to configure the animation component that has been set on my model. I need to click the Animations dropdown, and I can see that it has already been set for me. The only modification I need to make to this is to deselect Play Automatically, unless you want one of the animations to play automatically. The final step to this process is to select the game object, change your model name to Model, since this is typical of squad-made parts, changing the texture format from GDA smallest to MBM, since that is also the format that Kerbal Space Program uses, and then clicking Write. Your part has now been created, but we also need to make a simple config file for your part. Once you have written your part and then navigated to the place to which you have written it, you will notice that there are two files, model.mu, the model itself, and the texture. I have also included a part configuration file. It is easiest to copy one from something else and then modify it to your needs. A set of key components that you will need in your configuration file are name, model, author, the mesh and scale, the node definitions for attaching. Note that depending on the size of your part, you may need to adjust these nodes. For example, my part, being a size 2 part, needed adjustments on where they connected. Also note that KSP will scale your part down by 10. Thus, when you are adjusting these nodes, make sure that your dimensions are also scaled by 10, such that since the y-coordinate of the top part of my part was 0.75, I needed to adjust that to 7.5. Also, since the radius of my part is 1 unit, I needed to adjust for that by 10 units. More key components that you will need to worry about are those such as tech required, entry cost, as well as category. This will place it in one of the tabs. Currently, my part will be in utility. The title of your part, this is what the user will see. The manufacturer, the description. Also, the attachment rules. This defines what another part can do to attach to yours. For example, this part stacks. It attaches on the surface, in other words, on the side. It allows stacking. It allows surface attachments, such that those can be attached on the side, but it does not allow collision. More various key variables are those such as mass, drag model type, which is normally left to default, the crash tolerance, the maximum temperature, braking force, and braking torque. Lastly, for demonstration purposes, I have added an animation generic module that simply allows my doors to open and close by right-clicking on my part. In all reality, this is all it does. But using custom module behavior, which will be discussed in another episode, we can begin to make these animations do better things. The very last thing you need to do in order to successfully import your part into Kerbal Space Program is package it up. So, create a new folder, label it the name of your part, for example, me, it will be test part, and then add those 3 files into that folder. Then, copy this folder into one of the following locations. There are 2 options you have to do this. You can either set it in parts, as it is, or you can go to Game Data, create your own folder, titled, for example, the name of your mod, and then create a parts folder within that. So, as a repeat, you can simply place it into the top level parts folder, or you can create your own mod folder and then a parts folder within that, and then insert your part into that. Since I like organization, I normally create my own mod folder and insert it there. And that's it. Your part should now be included in the game. Let's see if we can find it in there real quick. Alrighty, now we're in the game. and we're going to begin searching for our part. So I have a save preset here. Just going to hit up this VAB. And since my part is a size 2, I'm going to start with the Mark 1-2 command pod. I'm going to look under Utility. And sometimes you'll find your part right up here at the beginning. Sometimes you'll find it at the end. And as you can see, it's in the game. It's right there. It's functioning. And now I'm going to take it out onto the launchpad to test the physics and make sure my collider has been configured correctly. So far, it hasn't fallen through the world. And as a final test, I'm going to make sure that my animation works. And everything's set. Congratulations, you've just made your own custom part. You've taken it through Unity to process it into the correct format, and you've imported it into the game. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I apologize for the delay in releasing this video. If you'd like to see more, please leave a comment or a thumbs up. Until next episode, this has been Nifty255.